morning, Deirdre.
Good morning, Tom. How are you this morning?
I'm good. I've just spent 2 hours talking with you anyway, so we
Well,
don't seem to. This doesn't seem to matter anymore, Deirdre.
just checking in. But I will say I'm very glad to have this official conversation with you now, which we're recording on the topic of judgment. And the reason I'm really glad is that you and I have been talking throughout this week about instances we've seen where judgment executed by people in positions where they should know better has been faulty. So you and I both feel that we should do some concentrating on the whole topic of judgment. And to that end, do you want to start with our radar screen? Because
Sure.
let's relate it exactly to everything else that we're teaching. People who have been listening to us recognize our radar screen in the background with the mindset of the leader as underlying everything else and deriving from that the 8 characteristics of a leader and so forth. The mindset and the 8 characteristics we talk about are things that relate to the leader himself or herself. And this is so important in relation to judgment because judgment is something that you build in yourself. You build in yourself the capabilities to execute on the characteristics and therefore do the other things on the radar screen at the top level of quality that you and I demand. And if we remember what that mindset of the leader is, it's the understanding and knowledge that derives from knowing about the marketplace, customers, competitors, emerging technologies, business and social factors, the entity itself, and so forth, so that you are constantly throughout your career building your knowledge so that you can, as needed, make decisions, take actions, build strategies, and so forth. And then as we talk about it, the 8 characteristics derive from the mindset, and the mindset gives you the ability to think strategically, get your job done, and so forth. And as we've been talking over the course of the week about judgment, we've been saying it almost seems to us that people involved did not take the time to do the work of building their mindset and developing the characteristics in themselves. So that by the time when they have to start making decisions by using our 3 questions or building strategies or executing on strategies or creating the value exchange, which, as you and I say, is the goal of all actions in the business world, they do not have the substance from which to make good judgments. And I'm sure you want to jump in at this point.
I don't have a lot to add other than context, Deirdre. The 8 characteristics they're about being a leader. They're the essential qualities, as we say there as the subtitle to the 8 characteristics of a great leader.
Mhm.
And when you're evaluating and you're trying to understand what's going on and trying to make decisions to move forward, it's critical that you have these essential qualities as they're internalized. They're the way you function.
Mhm.
So these aren't things that you look up and think, oh, I need to think strategically, right? This is stuff you have to have pre-built. This has to be in your foundation. And so we expect that you all will have built these over time, right? And to the degree that you haven't, that you sharpen them. And of course we're there to help, but hopefully your background and your support sections, your support network, your mentors, all those are there to help you with these things that you may have not have developed as well as you'd like. Also, it always helps to sharpen, right? Sharpen. And we believe that is the role of deep business, is to help you sharpen these things.
Mhm.
Almost all you all have these already. To the degree that you don't, let us know, right? We'll help you.
Yeah.
Right. There's
And
no harm in raising your hand and saying, you know what, I really don't have a good way of thinking strategically. I'm really not clear about that. Can you help me understand that? That is our role. But anyway, dear, did you want to make a point?
well, it just is that you're on exactly the right point here, that you can't simply do some reading and get knowledge, that you need to practice. You need to develop the experience. You need to get out there and do. That leadership is seen in how the leader acts in public, and the actions as appropriate come from having practiced with the mindset, done scenario planning, playing with ideas, practicing ideas, and so forth. You know, it's interesting. You and I both teach students who are not yet leaders. And I start to talk about the mindset of a leader with them, and they get this blank look and say, well, how do I get that mindset? What book do I read? And so like, it's not reading a book or two books on something that says, here's how do you develop a mindset. It's the practice of acquiring knowledge and experience, and not just about business. Your knowledge and experience from the whole breadth of fields that you're interested in provide ideas. And it's sometimes said that ideas are tools that you use. So the more ideas you have, the more ideas that you build into your mindset, the more tools you have to operate as a leader at a high level, execute according to the characteristics, and then do the high level work.
One point, and this is a small thing, but just so you understand, when we refer to students as being a group of people that we focus on, most of the people we spend our time with are actually sitting CEOs, many of whom have been our students and continue to be our students in various capacities. So Deirdre uses a shorthand to call people who are actually very successful long-term. Most of them aren't quite our generation, Deirdre, I would say. Maybe a couple are, but most of them are in the lower generation, a more recent generation. But we refer to them as students sometimes. So just be aware, when we say students, we're not talking about the traditional master's student or undergraduate student. And we've never really taught undergraduate. We've always taught master's and degrees. But regardless, the point behind this is really that you can be a long-term CEO, and myself included, and Deirdre also, and still think that there are certain aspects of the 8 characteristics that we have not perfected. And we still need to continue to hone those.
Mm-hmm.
You know, remaining an expert in the field is a very important one. Number 5, you know, what we're seeing a real weakness in this across the board. And it's expertise, and it's also being accomplished. So those 2 characteristics, we're seeing a weakness in this. And unfortunately, after years of perhaps not focusing on accomplishment and focusing on expertise to fill certain roles in any capacity, we're starting to see the things break, right? We just had a major outage in connectivity is probably the best way to say it, Deirdre. Fortunately, you and I have not been affected by it yet that we know, right? Now we haven't tried to go to the grocery store, or go to the doctor's office, or go to fly an airplane,
Right.
or to not flying. In my case, I would like to be flying. I'm not flying back yet, unfortunately, but flying in an airplane, we would find that tricky this morning.
Correct. A major technology outage and so forth. And just to add to what you're saying, Tom, it's not so much the knowledge. It's not so much working at something, it's delivering results. You know that I always point to results, that all of this stuff is nice. And you've got to have it, certainly. But unless you carry it through to deliver results, to actually accomplish, to move things forward, you're not really filling the full role of a leader there. Um, and I'm thinking maybe it's time for us to get more specific about judgment itself. Let me take a second. You and I have both read this book, Judgment by Noel Tyke and Warren Bennis, both very well known and respected authors, and a very interesting book. And in fact, I've written something about this book for the Deep Business Initiative. You'll find it on Patreon. But what they talk about is judgment is the core of effective leadership, which they then describe as an informed decision-making process, which covers three areas: decisions about people, strategic decisions, and decisions when in crisis. So let's work with this definition a little bit, Tom. I know you have very strong thoughts about all three of those points. Particularly, let's start with people. You have a lot of feelings about building good teams.
I do. So give them to us again. It's people's number one. Number two is
Strategic decisions, and three is decisions when in crisis.
yeah, yeah, yes, um, yes. So actually doing a nonsense or not on this book, right, Deirdre?
Yes, we
Uh,
are.
so I think that'll publish in our schedule, I believe, next Friday. Next Friday,
Uh,
or is
yeah,
it 2 weeks from Friday?
it's probably 2 weeks, but
Okay, so
anyway.
it's not going to be. We won't have the nonsense or not soon, but we can assure you that it's not going to come out as nonsense.
Right.
Um, but so when you in we used a word just a minute ago, and Deirdre just talked about it. She talked about people that deliver results, and it's the results that you expect, right?
Yes.
It's what you expect, and they're delivering the results you expect, at least to the minimum standard.
Right.
I use the word accomplished, right? They were expert and accomplished. Um, now, uh, we when we use the term expert and accomplished, what we mean is for the role. If your role is that you work as a checkout person in a grocery store, I actually better one as a bank teller because I actually was one at one point when I was in college. You don't expect me to have the expertise or the accomplishment of a seasoned CEO or Deirdre, for example. Not at that point in your life. What you're doing is, are you accomplished and are you expert at that role? We knew the woman that was. I mean, she was unbelievable. And everybody knows those people who are, and I can, to this day, she came to work with a scarf on every day. I mean, I can just tell, I know exactly who that woman was. Her name was Barbara. And this is when I was in my teens. And I can remember that woman because she was so good at that role, just outstanding. And she taught everybody. And she literally, in those days, mentored everybody in that branch bank. And it was actually the main location of a branch of a bank. And she was unbelievable. We all know those people. Those are the people we revere. Those are the people we like working with, right? All of us do. I don't care what role they are. And this is our point about we love people who they're people first, and then we especially like people who try to become expert and accomplished at whatever they do. And I will assure you, and we talk about this a lot, everything is hard when you get into the detail. I don't care as my son and I talk about and have for years now, ever since he was about 11 years old, a hot dog stand in New York City is a hard role to fill. Well, we all know, well, Deirdre, of course, would know, not hot dogs, but Franco would know the best hot dog stand in New York City. But our friend from Italy, who himself is an accomplished and expert CEO and founder and CEO, but any job is hard. Every job is hard, and it's when you don't think so, it's because you don't know how hard it is, right? I assure you, having been a bank teller, it is not easy to be a bank teller. Barbara reconciled everything every single day, and she helped you figure out when you couldn't reconcile what the potential problem was. And so this is what we're talking about, that when you decide that you're not going to look for that in people, you're going to not seek that, or that becomes less important. After a while, systems start to break down. And then you start questioning, well, how do we know that it was a person that lacked expertise and accomplishment that created the problem we just experienced this morning? We don't know that. And it could be an innocent person that was expert and accomplished that created it because something unknown, what you and I call the unseen enemy, right? That could, and those are just random, I call them random events of chaos, that things happen, right? Even to the best people, things happen. We don't know that, but what we do know is we're in a period where I think we're going to continue to experience over the next 12 to 18 months, and could be longer, I hope not, this situation. Now, we cannot, as leaders, change the world, right? There are people that can. I don't think most of us can. Right? We can change our world, but not the world. And so we have to decide, how are we going to change our world? The mindset of the leader is the way that you think about your world. And one of the key attributes that you have that is most valued is your judgment. It is how you see the world, how you triage the world, and how you deal with situations. Meaning, how do you analyze them? How do you apply critical thinking? And then how do you come to your judgment on the next steps that should be taken, that are the best next steps that you can evaluate? And I will tell you, having spent a lifetime working on this problem, the limit you have is, I call it either your friend or your enemy, is time. Time is your friend or your enemy in these things, because more time gives you more time to be able to apply all of these attributes and characteristics and techniques that are sitting here on the radar screen. And time also shrinks your ability. But when your ability is really shrunk down, those three questions are the most important questions you can ask yourself. Is, what am I missing? And what are the motivations of the key things that are happening? Why are they happening? What direction are they headed in? Why are they headed in that direction? And inevitably, there's people behind it. And then the question is, how are they motivated, and why are they pushing this in a certain direction? You can't always change that. So then it's a question of how does that influence how you think about what you're missing, and then figure out, is there a better way than leaving things to naturally occur the way they're occurring? That's what those three questions are about. It's triaging the world, and you as a leader figuring out, how do I take, what is the right next step? The right next step may be, let it happen. Let it naturally go to the next step. The next step might be, I need to intervene. When I intervene, am I going to intervene in the direction, my direction, their direction, the mutual direction, the natural direction it's occurring, or am I going to go against that? And if I do, what is the method I use to begin going against that? And how do I influence it, at least in as how much as the amount I can see? Time limits your ability to continue to analyze, to continue to fill in those, what am I missing? And so learning to develop that ability very rapidly to realize I have a limited amount of time. I need to make a decision in this window. With that being the case, how do I develop the skill to answer the what am I missing and what are the motivations of everybody aligned here? And how are they thinking about it? And how do I decide what the next step is? What is the reach I can achieve? Because you can't achieve the impossible, meaning I want this to stop. So what is the next step I can take to make it stop? It may be such a big deal. There's no way you can make it stop just based on one action. The question is, can you take a step forward in solving it or or influencing it or stopping it or whatever? That is the whole concept here about judgment, Deirdre. And that's why we put the 3 questions highlighted in the middle here. And then if you have time, you can move down to vision, mission, strategy, and put in place a structure of leadership and management to help you. And this is just exploitation of an opportunity or solving a problem. And there are complexities in this. They can be just a small team you put together that a bunch of volunteers, or they're a structure and an organization that you fund to be able to build out something and ultimately to achieve the value exchange. But regardless, you have to start at the top with a mindset. You have to be able to think about the world, your world. And ultimately, it's about the bottom piece, the value exchange, because what you're doing as a leader is you're making trade-offs. And that's what value exchange is. Now, we call it a value exchange because in the real world, it is not always, money is not always the positive value. It could be buying time. It could be preserving a network online being up, right? And money becomes it becomes not the primary focus at that point, because having the availability of that global network being available to everybody to operate the world, because we are a world that's founded in technology today. We are businesses operating on a technology foundation. And if nothing ever proved that to us, these last 12 hours have proved that. I see you laughing in the background, dude. Right? I mean, you and I keep telling everybody, we've said this for years, that we have become a set of businesses that are running on top of a technology infrastructure. And we are rapidly proving that to ourselves, if for those of us that have been skeptics about that statement. Now, I've been rambling on here for a while, Deirdre, and I want to give you the chance to put your thoughts in.
Okay, well, let's focus on the questions again. And in the context of judgment, it's actually an act of judgment to know that you have to ask those questions. If you do not have judgment, if you have not built your mindset, you don't even know that you should be asking these things. You may accept things that get thrown at you without asking the questions about them, and thereby make a bad decision because you simply don't have the breadth of context to be able to operate at the high level a leader should. But even if you simply have the judgment to ask the questions, that's one up. But if you want to do a good job of answering the questions, you have to have even a higher level of judgment. You may sense as an act of judgment that you're missing something. But if you really have the judgment and the mindset of the leader and the knowledge and understanding implicit in that mindset, you can almost start to set out what you're missing. You know, like, do I have the understanding of who the players are, or what the marketplace is, or how people are going to react to this? Or do I know enough about the technology to do that? You have a framework where you can analyze what you might be missing, or you may have a sense of how to analyze whether motivations are aligned, or certainly the higher your level of judgment, the better able you are to distinguish courses that you can take, I mean, courses of action that you can take, your better way or a way to save something or whatever. And this, the more you move over from routine to crisis, remember that's one of the three things that Tyche and Bennis said was you make the judgments about the people, the strategies, and the crisis. The more you find yourself dealing with crisis, the higher the level of judgment you need to get yourself out of the whole thing. I mean, let's take this technology outage that we've been dealing with today. I'm sure that a lot of people, good leaders, good functional people, are just flat-footed because they don't even understand how to answer these three questions. And you know, admittedly, this is an unexpected, but it's not an unprecedented. I'm actually moving toward the word risk. I won't really mention the word risk quite yet, Tom, but I think we should bring in risk here fairly soon. I think that a good leader with good judgment would have, what am I missing? Okay, where is the downtime? Where is the problem? Is it my systems? Is it someone else's systems? What can I isolate? Can I get some things up and running, or do I have to wait for? In other words, the more you know, the broader your mindset is, the more of an expert you are in the field, the more decisions you have, the better judgment you can execute in this sort of thing. You can start to set out a better way. So it's not simply having judgment or not having judgments. It's building your judgment over time so that you can operate at increasing levels of effectiveness by executing at higher levels of decision making and judgment. And now we come to the risk and crisis, Tom. I know you have a lot to say about that, the role of
Yes.
judgment and
So
risk.
we've dealt tangentially with the people piece. It's about the less you focus on expertise and accomplishment and results driven to expectation, and then people that fit what you need to do. So notice the bottom sentence about this. It says you either fit or you do not.
Right.
This all is about fit. Everything's about fit. Do you fit the role? So once you get away from there, you can create tactical or you can create strategic issues. I think we're moving from tactical issues now into strategic issues of system failure because of the lack of focusing on this area of expertise and accomplishment and driven people that fit. Now, again, we can't change the world. What we can do is change our world, right? So this is about thinking strategically in our world. Now, when I say think strategically and use sound judgments and make effective decisions, that's number one in the characteristics of a great leader. You can see it listed at the top of the sheet there. Some people say, well, what about time? What about time? What if I have no time? I can't think strategically. I think you can.
Yeah.
And it's a matter of take that split second. So the example I use is, I know Deirdre is a trained swimmer. I'm a trained swimmer. But I can swim with boots on. Most people find that difficult. But, well, I'm not sure I could swim with boots on this moment, Deirdre, but I will get there. Give me another, few months and I'll get back. But if I saw a young child who is struggling in a swimming pool, the first thing that would cross my mind is thinking strategically, is there anybody that's here that could help better than me right now? Anybody, right? Is there someone closer? Is there someone who's right? Is there a lifeguard? Whatever. I have to quickly look. Then I say, nope, it's me. So then the next thing is, am I ready to do this? And I may just kick my shoes off. Even though I can swim with shoes on, I'm going to kick them off and jump in that pool and grab that child. Now, did I spend 5 minutes doing this? No. I spent maybe a second, maybe 2, maybe 3, but I'm in that water and now I'm better prepared, or someone else was closer and they got to the child quicker because I scanned quickly. That is what we mean about thinking strategically. It's about taking that second, but you have to train yourself, because otherwise you'll immediately become tactical and you'll immediately start doing. And good leaders spend a second to think strategically. Now, not forever, because again, as I've said, time, and you'll see this in a minute when we get into the details of judgment. I've said this before, time can be your friend or your enemy. It could be that you don't even have that second. You have to act, then you do what you have to do. But you've at least trained yourself to say, do I have a second or do I not? Right? You're using your mind. Now, again, your mind may, if you've developed yourself to be acting in a certain situation, there are times when you're trained yourself very carefully to tactically react. No matter if this happens, boom, I react immediately. That's perfectly fine. We're talking about when you have to analyze a situation to decide to do something. That's what we're talking about here, which is most of what we experience in a day. We do have that friend of time mostly to be able to make a judgment of some sort. So that's that, but that's what gets you into the strategic mindset. So when the folks that wrote Execution get in there, Bennis et al., and they're talking about strategic decisions, they mean that you have the time and you are able to think in a longer sense. And that's what the second group of things below the 3 questions are. That's what vision, mission, strategy is. And that's the discipline that you use when time is your friend, to be able to then to think strategically. Now, we would say you almost always try to at least put an element of strategy. And that's what the first step of vision is. You can see if you drop your eyes, 2 steps below vision, you see the first line says for problem solving, but below that you see future state. That's what the vision is. It's the future state. What do you want the future state to be? I want that child safe out of that swimming pool. That's the future state I want. And my question to myself is there somebody else that can help better this very moment, that's better, that can do the one thing we know is a problem, which is time, and can shrink that time versus me? Because if there isn't, then I'm going to do it. But you can't waste too much time doing that. Then if you look down below mission, it's what are the next steps? What is your job, your next step to begin a process of getting to that future state? That's your mission. And your job is, in this one, the future state is something that I expect to happen within 10 seconds or 20 seconds. So my job is to accomplish that in that 20 seconds or as quickly as I possibly can. And then the approach is, I'm going to do it myself because I'm the closest one there and there's nobody else to do it, and I'm going to kick my shoes off on the way. So that, because the approach is your strategy, that's your strategy. So hopefully, as you have time and time becomes your friend, you can start employing these capabilities that will allow you to define a vision, define the future state, to define the mission, is the job to achieve the future state. And if it's a lengthy job, if it's over years, it's to develop what is your next key step. And then the approach is the approach to that next key step or accomplishing the job if time is not your friend. And then that leads to developing a leadership and management model to develop the team that you're going to create to help support you in achieving this. And actually, it's the building out of the execution of your strategy. And this gives you what I call to create leverage for yourself to deliver as much results as you possibly can. Right? That's the whole concept behind leadership and management. It's leadership provides you the organization ability and the delegation ability, if you do it well, the leadership and management model. And it's so that the purpose behind that, though, is to create the leverage for yourself, to deliver results that have leverage, meaning maximize the opportunity, or in the language that we're using here, to optimize the value exchange of that opportunity. And we further define, that it's the leader's job to define what, when, and why something needs to occur. And then it's the management job to define how, and then who because of the how, and then actually delivering the results. But all within the context of the leader has final responsibility for everything that happens. And then ultimately it is that value exchange. So notice how we went from, the strategic thinking can be in a second to I built a whole organization around this and a whole business plan, Deirdre, to start it and fund it and so forth. So I've dealt with that, and I think we've dealt with the crisis, right? We've talked about that, but I'm going to turn it back to you to deal with the crisis piece.
Okay. What you're really talking about here, it really struck me, Tom, is that judgment is an action word. It's not something that just sits in a person, I have good judgment. It's that I exercise my judgment to accomplish certain things. That in the example you're giving about, I've exercised my judgment to prepare so that when a child falls in the pool, I have trained myself to make a decision on the spot to save the life of that child. In a broader sense, in a business, I've trained my people, I've built the processes so that when a crisis happens, we know how to operate, we know how to execute. These are the fire drills we all went through in school and probably laughed at and tried to stay inside and so forth. But the purpose of the fire drills, it's an execution of judgment to put a process in place so that people know how to act in a crisis. And the more practice you have, the more that you treat judgment as an action word, the more that you build the 8 characteristics and do your thinking and build your mindset, the better able you are able to act in a crisis, to lead in a crisis, and the better able the entity you work with is able to operate in a crisis. I mean, let's take this technology shutdown, which is going to go on for days, I'm sure. It's going to take a week or so for all companies to get back on track, if not more than that. But I'll suggest to you that the companies that already had crisis plans in place, where a leader exercised judgment to think through what should happen, and therefore train the people and build the processes so that when X happens, we know what to do, well, they'll come out of this whole thing better. And it's not simply having the processes in place, though. It's a little more complicated than that. It's having the right processes in place for the right situation. We both know that crises can happen where we might do the same sorts of things, but for different reasons. Or a crisis might happen and it's one of 3 scenarios, and we have to pick the right scenario so that we execute the right processes and so forth. So it becomes our ability to think quickly, draw on what we've already created, understand, see what's happening, understand what's happening, and then react quickly, that quickly, if needed. Now, sometime you do need to take a deep breath and take a little time to figure out what's going on and to make decisions in a crisis, but frequently not. I mean, the classic one is the Johnson & Johnson Tylenol. How quickly did they act as soon as someone figured out that there were bottles of Tylenol out there with poison pills in them?
And we're probably dating ourselves terribly, Deirdre, on this one, but that's a classic case of a well executed crisis. And the individual who was the chair of the board of Johnson & Johnson at that point, and Johnson & Johnson in those years was a premier company around the world, well run, with an incredible reputation.
Right.
And it has suffered the ills of many of equivalent brands that have survived into this era where they've tarnished their not tarnished, I'm going to say they have diminished in their stature is probably a better way to describe it. And they're not alone. They're not alone by far. But what we're talking about here is that there are two ways you can think about the skill of being able to react in a crisis. One is you've trained yourself to the specific crisis. And this is why we have first responders who, they're a good example of people who spend their life training for specific situations, and they know how to react in those situations, and they've trained themselves, and so they're crisis oriented. That's their way of life, and you can do that. But again, if that's your world, right, you've narrowed your world down to a set of crises, and they're probably pretty good at things they've never seen before because they have that mindset, right? That's that point, the generalized ability to deal. For leaders, for people like ourselves and those that we work with, and also the people that want these jobs, right? They want these big jobs. It's really important that you develop the ability to think that way, that it's a more generalized ability. Now, I've had the benefit of having to learn that as a very young person coming out of college. I had to learn this, and I had to learn it in a more general way. And so it's helped me along my life, and it's added a great dimension because I get to do things I wouldn't have otherwise gotten to do, even to this day. Now it's more about evaluating people to do really significant positions that most people wouldn't even think about, that there are only 18 of them in the world, by the way, on our side. There are probably the equivalent, maybe a slightly larger group on the other side. But what we're evaluating is judgment. The rest can be taught. All these other people teach these people, but they look to a handful of people like us to independently evaluate how good is their ability to deal with the unknown, because most often that's what people get hung on, right? We don't know what the situation here with this outage is, but it's likely to be something that was unknown. Like I said, we call these unseen enemies, and then there's a whole category of unseen enemies that you should have seen, right? Because you should have anticipated. But then there's a group that I like to call the random acts of chaos. And these are the things that happen to everything and everybody, and they just happen. It's statistically going to happen. Now, in the moment, you can't try to analyze unless it's part of the process. You have to ignore the cause at the moment. Usually, you just have to deal with, okay, now what do I do now? And if it's part of analyzing and triaging, you have to get into it. But most of the time, you have to deal with what's in front of you. And so that the skill for people like us and those who want our jobs is this ability to have a generalized ability to do this, Deirdre. That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about a special operations operator or someone who is in the first responder world, and you could consider some of those people to be first responders, actually, if they just do a response in a different way. And we're talking about that generalized skill. And this is why you and I have built what you and I are doing, and what Deep Business is about is really helping the leaders and the people that want to be leaders develop that mindset that is really your thought process, your way of thinking about the world. How do I deal with my world, the world I've defined for myself? And then how do you develop the abilities you need, the capabilities you need to be able to deal with that world as a leader, That's what we do. This generalized skill of judgment has been on our mind for a while now. And we've decided to open up a program that we have that has been going on mostly with me, but Deirdre's been involved. Is analyzing, it's better said, evaluating and sharpening the generalized judgment capability. And most recently, it's being used, actually, I use it now to help make that judgment that I mentioned a minute ago about 18 active people in the world on our side that are doing what I help make a judgment on. The people that get to become those people. We've decided to take and transport that process to what we're doing. And we have the ability because it's my process, right? So we've decided to now open it up because we can. So that's what our Judgment Symposium is about, Deirdre. It is a symposium which is to begin introducing this generalized judgment capability, developing it in those who haven't developed it as far along as they want to, and also to sharpen the abilities of people who would like to sharpen their ability in this. So I know that's what you wanted me to talk about this morning, was ultimately about the Judgment Symposium. And we took a long time to get there, but
you have this written up, I think, a little bit.
I do, and you can see I'm fueling myself with yesterday's iced latte, which there's no more, oh, you can't see it, which there's no more ice in because it's yesterday's, and a Diet Coke, right? Which is of
course, the standard
for a Southerner, right? Well, it should be a Coke, but I've given that up. All right. So here is our Judgment Symposium, and we're doing, this is a shallow dive, meaning it's only one chart to talk about this. So this is something that I could explain it in only a few minutes, and I promise I will do that because we're taking an enormous amount of time on this, but it is the most important subject that we deal with. This Judgment Symposium is about attributes, technique, and scenario. So the attributes and technique is that the attribute is judgment. And there are various aspects of judgment that we will take and focus on. For example, when we do the symposium on a monthly basis, which we will be doing once a month, and it occurs, I believe, at the last Wednesday of this month, Deirdre?
The last Wednesday of each month.
Yeah, so it'll be the last Wednesday of every month from now on. We will be doing an hour of practicing this technique. So first it's to talk about an attribute of judgment, and then it's to use a suggested technique to be able to execute that attribute and sharpen that attribute. We'll use a real simulation, meaning a situation that has already occurred, and I will likely use things that have occurred where we don't really have an answer. So there is no real answer because it didn't go well, so we don't know. And so then it's a real situation. What will be unreal is I will give you limited time because, again, time is your enemy or your friend. So we will let you have 1 to 3 minutes to think about a plan of what you're going to do once the scenario has been described to you. And then 1 to 3 minutes to face the situation and decide what to do using the technique that we're talking about. And it could be any way from negotiating something to be able to question somebody, to be able to have your team and ask your team for guidance and making a decision based on their guidance. We set the scenario up to be real. And now, you could think this could be really difficult, and it is. But we try not to make it any more difficult than it has to be, because this is about learning this. And so if you learn in an element of having fun while you're learning, meaning it's not penalty, well, there'll be plenty of time for you to execute this with plenty of external pressures, right? We don't need to teach you that. You've got plenty of experience having the outside world pressure you in ways that we both understand, we all understand, distractions and whatever. We don't try to put this in. We will have optional situations where you can experience it if you want. We're not going to put our normal people through this because usually you don't need to do that. This is about enjoying the process. So and because it's really important, most people that are reticent doing these things, they have a difficult time enough dealing with the time simulation issue and the lack of information and so forth. So we don't add anything else. We actually try to make it as fun for everybody as possible. We also we take timeouts if we have to, where the person doing the actual decision making can raise their hand and say, I want a timeout. I need help. I don't know what to do next. And so we guide you in that process. So this is about being fun, and it's a no penalty situation. But I will tell you that we did a variation of this recently. We had everybody did really not so well, Deirdre, the first time through.
They had some learning to do.
But after an hour, these people all got the next piece done. And in this case, they didn't realize this, but it was to let Deirdre say, you know what, I'll spend a little more time on this. Come see me next week. They could not get there. They didn't know that was what they did because they hadn't thought it through to decide, wait a minute, what could I really accomplish right in that time? Because they didn't have any time. And they finally realized, well, the best I could possibly do in that scenario is just to get her to give me more time to explain myself, because it was a complex situation we asked them to get her to make a judgment on. Well, at first they went in there trying to get her to say yes or no, which is impossible under those conditions, right? But they didn't think it through in a real enough sense. But once they started getting the reality of, look, this is real. What would you do? They finally got it, and they did great. Everybody approached it differently because everybody has a different personality. We had those who freely admitted, I am an introvert and I don't even like having it being in person, having you be able to see me during these. I just want to have my voice coming through. To those people that are really good, but meaning they're extroverted. They're more extroverted in their personalities. Nobody got through it the first time, though. Nobody got to the point where Deirdre was still pushing back on them when their time ran out. But it's learning that ability to very quickly figure out, okay, on the time I have, what could I expect to get done? And then how can I actually get that done in that time? I only have a certain amount of time. How do I approach it? And then being able to apply that technique, Deirdre, using your personality, the way you function. So the person who is self-described as introverted applied the technique in a very different way than the person who is extroverted applied it. So it wasn't about doing it a certain way. It's about internalizing that technique and explain. And then we had somebody who's in the middle, actually tends to be a little bit more on the introverted side, who just did great. I mean, became comfortable. I mean, it was amazing to see that she actually has the ability to deal with crisis situations. Because when she got herself figured out how to apply the technique, she actually became, did you notice? She actually started leaning over like this and put a smile on her face when she started the whole discussion, and she got comfortable.
Right.
And we've never seen her in that environment like that before. So it's about learning that and getting it so you're comfortable and you can see that I know how to take this and apply it. And so this is about just developing these capabilities and applying it. And we will hold this seminar, what we call a mini symposium, once a month, to have people just come and sharpen their skills. And what you're doing is you're sharpening that critical thinking and judgment abilities. And as I say here, it is your most valuable asset. We have friends, one of the folks that I'm sure will come and coach us, and probably in the symposium we'll have in October, Deirdre, where we'll do a half-a-day symposium on this subject. And we will do it in person and also do it online. And we're not sure where we're going to do it in person yet. If I have my druthers, Deirdre, it's going to be on the North Shore, as you can tell.
Right. I can tell.
But regardless, he will say, and he's a professional chairman of the board these days, of major public companies. He will tell you that consistently, and this goes from the day he founded a very large public company to today, the most valuable asset in anybody that he looks for is that critical thinking around judgment. So it's applied to judgment. And the other thing that as to why do this is because we're using best practices, technique, method, and context to be able to create a generalized ability to apply this skill. So Deirdre, I have I did not a shallow dive on this subject. I did a deep dive, and I apologize because we have the shallow dive background, and we don't even have the shallow. This is the daily background. I don't even have either one up today.
Right. Well, then let me finish with, I guess, one idea. I've been throwing a lot of words out. I'm about to throw another word out, and that is responsibility, which I see going hand in hand with the concept of judgment. The good examples of judgment that we will teach you, that you will see yourself in the seminars, involve someone having a responsibility for the outcome, for the results again, that word I like. And in fact, one of my little tests to see whether someone even has judgment is to see if they stand up in front of microphones and start making excuses, that person does not have good judgment. But if they take responsibility and then start to work toward a solution, then this person has judgment. And my faith in their ability to create a good outcome rises. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So,
we say right here, Deirdre, we say right here that, you take
number
full
two, get the job done
responsibility.
and take
Right.
full responsibility.
And
And that's what it comes down to, I think, that part of judgment is the acceptance of responsibility. That is the acceptance that you are the one who has to take the action and make the decisions. And the greater the degree of your judgment capability, the better the outcome, and the easier it is to accept the responsibility that goes along with that.
you can follow the pattern here. Use sound judgment. Take full responsibility. Your individual contribution, and what you just heard from Deirdre was your individual contribution is to take full responsibility and make a considered judgment about what to do. And that's what high quality considered action is all about.
Right.
And so it's the top four of these that lead you down this path. And then it's about your expertise, your ability to build a team and leverage, your ability to communicate, and then ultimately it's solving problems and exploiting opportunities, and to make sure that you fit and all the people helping you and the resources fit everything. They fit the culture, they fit the context, they fit the timing, right? So this is where these characteristics come from. These are real, these are hard won contexts. And you see here, this is one that comes directly out of the mouth of my friend that I mentioned a minute ago. I just about said his name, Deirdre. I'm sure he wouldn't mind, but I don't want to expose. We've said we're not exposing names in this stuff. But after the first 3 months, you own the problem. Meaning, once you've had 3 months over the target, you're 3 months into the job, you're 3 months with this new responsibility, it is yours. And then you either fit doing it or not, but it is your problem. And after that point, you cannot point backwards. And, there's nothing worse than people that blame others. It's bad enough to blame in that first 3 months. You should probably never do that anyway. But to be where we have somebody who's a year and a half, almost 2 years out, and they're still blaming somebody from a year or 2 years ago. I mean, it's just, it's inexcusable.
It's a lack of judgment and lack of responsibility, and it just, to put it mildly, reflects badly on you if you do it, and on people like that if they do it.
Absolutely.
So I'm looking forward to this, Tom. This role playing, the scenario playing, and so forth is just a lot of fun, and it's a great way to learn.
We had a really good time the other day. We were using this technique for something else, and we had a great time. As you can tell, we were talking about this, and everybody did, and everybody left positive and having enjoyed themselves and having made progress.
Right.
And that's the most important thing. Every single room, everything a person in the room made progress. And that was the thing that is so heartening about doing this. And it is why you and I enjoy this particular thing as much as anything we do. I have a lot of conviction around these subjects. This is really important, and both of us do. This is what we spend a lot of time thinking about and working through.
Yes, we do.
It's great to see you.
Okay, so long for now.
Bye.
Bye.